Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Culture Encounters podcast, road trip edition. It's been a couple weeks since we have had an episode. I have been on vacation. Slash, we had a Culture Encounters event this past 2 weeks, so my time has been spent there. But I am back, and we are talking about the Empire State, talking about New York. This is probably one of multiple New York episodes we're gonna do because New York is such a vast state with so many different cultures, so many different areas that have their own stories to tell. But we'll get started with some state facts before we get started. So we've got our state animal is the beaver. Our state beverage is milk. Our state bird is the eastern bluebird, which I'm seeing a photo of. Is absolutely gorgeous. State bush is the lilac. Albany is our state capital. Trout. They have two state fish. Brook trout is the freshwater state fish, and striped bass is the saltwater striped or is the saltwater state fish. State fruit is the apple. State flower is the rose. Uh, State motto is Excelsior. I wonder if that's where Stan Lee got it. If anybody knows, please let me know because Stan Lee's catchphrase Marvel Comics is Excelsior. Wonder if he got that from that. Um, and let- let's see if I can find the state. The state snack is yogurt, apparently. So today we are primarily going to be focusing on Long Island, New York. My guest is actually my stepdad, Bob Cotton. He grew up and was born in the Long Island area. So, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and bring in Mr. Bob Cotton. Hey, Bob, how are ya?
Hey Chad, how are things today?
Good. They're good. Thank you. Thanks for being here
Good.
today.
Glad to be.
So let's go ahead and start with just talking about your history with New York. So, where did you live? How long did you live there? And what was growing up there like?
I lived in a town on the south shore of Long Island called Baldwin.
Okay.
Baldwin was basically a commuter town to New York City. Long Island was populated heavily after the war. There were a lot of tract homes built out on Long Island in the farms. There were a lot of farms on Long Island in the earlier days. I was born in 1954, grew up on Long Island, lived there till I was about 30, maybe 31, and when I moved to Richmond, Virginia. So I grew up and enjoyed my whole childhood on Long Island.
Awesome. So you mentioned the track homes that were built and it was kind of in transit to the city. I'm thinking my timeline. This would have been around the time of like Levittown in Pennsylvania, right? Of like the suburbs really starting to become a thing, right? So
Correct.
was that something that trend of people wanting to leave the city? Did that hit New York as well, or was it just like, oh well, this might be a place? Maybe I'll work in the city, but I want to live elsewhere.
Well, Levittown was on Long Island.
Oh, was it? I don't know why I thought it was
Yeah,
in
the
Pennsylvania.
Levitt homes were built on Long Island. They were built primarily in the Merrick, Wantagh, Levittown area.
Oh,
And from
okay.
there, a lot of other builders took off, but they were tract homes. I know my dad bought his first home in Baldwin, the house I grew up in 1953,
Hmm.
and he paid like $3,000 for the house.
Oh wow. Imagine that now.
Yeah,
That's barely more than my monthly rent in my house.
exactly.
Inflation is real. Uh, but that's I'm glad y'all were able to start a life there and everything.
All right.
So what are some misconceptions you think people have about New York in general? I would imagine, like, when I think New York, I'm guilty of it, not being from there. My mind immediately goes to Manhattan and the things that you hear about Manhattan. How
As
is
does everybody.
right? So, how is Long Island different? What is at least as of when you were living there or whenever you visit, because I know you still have family there. What is the the culture of Long Island like? Does Long Island have its own distinct flavor of culture around it?
Long Island had a very diverse culture, as did Manhattan, with a lot of immigrants moving to New York over the term when immigrants were accepted through Ellis Island and they came
Right.
into New York and then migrated east and then further parts west and what have you. So Long Island had a very diverse culture between the Italians, the Jews, the Greeks. There was every culture you can imagine came out of New York to live on Long Island. It was more affordable, and it was a simpler lifestyle than living in the suburban New York City area.
Now I know in was there a sense of assimilation or integration within the a wider Long Island culture versus like if you go to Manhattan, you'll have pockets of like districts that like this is the Italian district, this is the
Chinese,
uh
yeah.
yeah
Yeah,
uh
little Chinatown. Yeah, you've got the Greeks. You got to. They all have their own little areas, so to speak, and that
right
still remains true today, as far as I know. On Long Island, I think you had some of that. I don't think it
right
was as prevalent as it was in the city because people tended to disperse amongst different communities and different areas of Long Island.
right. Okay, so less compartmentalized and more widespread, and that's awesome. So, you in your career work with, different cultures literally all the time.
Hmm.
Um, do you think growing up in Long Island helped you kind of shape you in that way of like, okay, this person's got a different, cultural experience than me. This person's got a different life experience than I do. Uh, you know, Knowing you, you're very open to that, and you love learning about people. So, what do you think growing up in New York or growing up in Long Island helped you kind of understand that there's more than just one culture out there, more than just one group of people out there?
Absolutely. Growing up where I did, I was exposed to many cultures. And again, my formative years were like in the 60s. And 60s were an interesting time. I don't care where you were in the
Right.
United States. It was a very
Right.
interesting time. So
Oh yeah, we got to tell your Woodstock story.
that's a good one.
Yeah.
But, my father was a police officer on Long Island, New York.
Okay.
And he put in 31, 33, I think 33 years on the police force, and he graduated through the police force and became probably about 5 ranks from the top, which is commissioner, which is an appointed position. But he
Right.
was a full inspector on Long Island. Now, being that, he also, the town we lived in, Baldwin, was right next to a very heavily populated minority area called Roosevelt. And my dad was the community liaison officer during the 60s. My dad always helped deliver a message of tolerance and acceptance. So that helped back in those days. One of the other things that really drove a lot of people in New York was the Greek delis, the Greek restaurants, the Greek diners. There's nothing like a 24-hour Greek diner on Long Island that after you're done out with your buddies all night having a good time, you go to a Greek diner. You have a good meal at
Ooh,
2
nice.
a.m. or 3 a.m. I mean, but they were all over the place and they were fantastic. Um,
Nice.
Italian restaurants were numerous. Everybody's heard about New York pizza, and it's true. It is the best. Uh, a man from New York would say that.
Right.
And the same with bagels. Bagels was a thing on Long Island, and today, even where I live now, down in South Carolina, people from New York say, "I still get my bagels up in New York. They send them down to me, or make a trip up, or it's
Yeah,
a cultural thing that you grew up with, and it's very strong.
it's something in the water, right?
It's about the
That's
water. It's
yeah,
about
that's what
the
we.
water and how it's used and how they bake, and yeah,
I don't know if I've ever had bagels from. That's not true. There's a restaurant in Virginia where I live called Cupertino's. Shout out to Cupertino's. I believe they actually bring their water down from New York.
they were from New York. That family is
Yeah,
a New York Italian family. Yeah,
yeah, best bagels in Richmond. I'll say it.
absolutely.
That I've ever had. And the New York pizza, like you'll get. And I'm glad we're having this transition now because we were inevitably going to get to food because that's the best way to talk about any culture. Is that you'll get New York pizza has become like a brand in itself. Like like Pizza Hut has New York pizza in quotes, but it's like there's a lack of authenticity there. Going to New York and eating pizza in Manhattan, so good.
So good.
Uh,
So good.
so
And
good.
people there know whether you're from New York or not by how you eat that pizza.
Oh,
You take that triangle and you fold it over and you eat from the
yeah.
back. And a lot of
Uh,
people don't eat their pizza that way, but that's how you do New York pizza. It's not Chicago pizza where it's deep dish. It's New
yes.
York thin crust pizza, and that's what you do.
I also, in my travels to New York, the other amazing food that I've had there is cheesecake.
Okay.
Yeah, we went to this place in Times Square about 10 years ago now, and I swear the cheesecakes were like the slices of cheesecake were like a meal in themselves. They were so big. It was just huge, but just in general, so much food was good there. Um, what is the So let's talk a little bit about the different um regionalisms of New York. And I'm sure we'll come back to food, but the
Yeah.
different regionalisms of New York versus where you're at now in South Carolina, or living in Virginia for a long time. For example, what do you call a carbonated soft drink? What is that called in New York?
Soda.
Soda. Okay, so that's the same in
Pretty
Virginia.
much. Yeah. It's not pop like you're out in, Ohio or what have
Yeah,
you.
Ohio. Oh, it's so I they Tristan, my girlfriend, fiance, laughs at me because whenever anybody says pop, I just get this big smile on my face, and it's like this really cool like thing to me. That
What about when you're having a big thick sandwich? Is that a hoagie or a hero?
to me that's a sub.
See, in New York, it's a hero.
Yeah, it's a
Out
here.
out west, it's a hoagie,
Yeah,
right?
is it
And
a
in
here?
Richmond, it's a sub.
Yeah. What
Hero,
about
hero is a slice of the meat off the spit. The way they cook it, the Greeks cook it on the spit where it rotates, and they just slice it off as they need it.
what do you call your mother's sister?
My mother's aunt.
Aunt. Okay, yeah, aunt. My family it was always aunt, but occasionally it'll be aunt.
Well,
Uh
depending on whether you talk real Longines,
huh.
Longanese, it's
Yolanda.
aunt. My aunt told me what to do.
You got
You
that
got
nasally,
typical New Yorkers. New Yorkers talk slightly different. Depends on what part of New York you grew up in, right?
right.
And
When your Giants are playing and
that's
and
right.
they're, and they're not doing well, that's when the Long Island comes out.
You better believe it.
Somewhere my mother is nodding her head ferociously, I'm
Oh
sure.
yeah. Oh yeah.
When my mom is a Cowboys fan, my stepdad is a Giants fan, so my mom and Bob are constantly. Football season's a really fun time around the house. Absolutely.
First game of the season this year, Giants
Yeah,
and Cowboys. So
yeah.
we'll see how the
Uh,
season's going to go then.
there you go. You guys have high hopes this year?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's good. My Atlanta baseball team is crushing it right now.
they are indeed.
We're about to go see a game. Actually, me, Bob, and my mom are going to Atlanta. So if anybody has any suggestions for fun things to do in Atlanta, please put them in the comments because we're going to be there in a couple weeks. So,
Right.
yeah. So, how do you say if you're trying to talk to a group of people? What do you call them? If you see like a group of people and you say, "Hey, come here,"
Hey, you guys, come here.
it's you guys in
You
Long
guys.
Island. It's
Yeah.
not you. It's not yous guys.
Depends on whether you're using a dialect or not. You guys are doing that. I'm going to do this.
Got you. Okay. Yeah.
It depends
Whereas
on how
like,
strong your dialect is and how New York. If you're in Brooklyn, it'll be
yeah,
you guys.
yeah. Okay. So it's more of a Brooklyn thing than a Long Island thing.
Yeah, Brooklyn, Queens. Just east of the city, you go
Mm,
into the borough of Queens and
mm.
Brooklyn, and then you start to move into the towns of Long Island.
I want to talk a little bit about the speed and energy. They call New York City the city that never sleeps. It goes everything goes incredibly quickly. Um, and because people seems like they're always on the move. It doesn't matter what time of day it is. There's always going to be so many people coming and going, and life doesn't really stop. The speed in Long Island, what is that like? Is it more laid back than the city? How is it compared to, say, where you lived in the suburbs of Richmond?
Well, like I said, I moved from Long Island to Richmond in 1983, and that was a tremendous culture shock.
Yeah, talk a
Um,
little bit about that. What was that like for you to move to Virginia from Long Island?
well, Long Island, when I grew up, again, everybody that lived on Long Island came from the city, so they had that same pace.
Right.
And Long Island grew so rapidly and expanded so quickly from town to town to the shopping centers to everything that it was, again, extremely close to the Manhattan pace, but slower in a lot of ways. Moving from, again, I moved with my company from New York. We relocated to Richmond. And I was one of the team of 8 people that moved from the company, and we started the company development from there. And to hire people and to get the work ethic and the work speed that we had in New York was virtually impossible.
Really?
People just did not move at the same pace. The construction crews did not move at the same pace. Everything was behind, and it was okay, according to them. To us, we wanted it done. We wanted it done then. We got trucks coming. We got to move things. You guys got to unload. You got to get it here. You got to do that. And it was difficult to get the cooperation that we desired. But over time, it kind of melded together. We
Right.
learned to accept their speed. They learned to accept our urgency, and everything worked out.
What was um what was that like, as far as you had that, obviously, that work ethic instilled in you, and to knowing you as well as I do to this day, you still have a ridiculously strong work ethic. So what do you think that your time in New York, in Long Island, like that, those formative years there, do you think that kind of shaped that for you?
I think most definitely did. And I think my first job helped form a lot of that as well, which was working at McDonald's.
Yep, mine too.
Uh, we opened a brand new store in the town that I grew up in, and I was on the original crew. And the manager of that store instilled in us the work ethic that was the McDonald's way.
Huge shout out to all food service workers now, and of any time, as working in McDonald's those first couple years. Man, even just you know anybody that handles your food, respect them. Is my message to the world, because I had a lot of interesting people, like, that I would talk to. It was when I worked at McDonald's, we were right off the interstate. So I would meet people from all over the country,
That's
because,
right.
they would stop and go to the bathroom. They would, order a burger and then go. And just, it would be interesting too. Most people, I would say most people are very friendly and very kind. But the people who aren't are really unfriendly, and just like, uh, it's one of those things too where part of me is like, "Ah, I don't want anyone to have to work at McDonald's," but at the same time, everybody eats it, so it's important
That's right.
in a way. So, respect people that work there.
That's right.
To the universe. So, well, I gotta know. What was your first time? Do you remember, like, because I hear stories all the time about people, like, they go to a restaurant in Virginia or the South, and they get asked, you order like a tea, and they ask sweet or unsweet. Were you like, what?
Yeah,
What?
exactly. Exactly. I mean, we didn't understand what sweet tea was.
Right.
It just was not. It wasn't a thing in New York. Basically, you got your tea, and if you wanted it sweet, you put your own sugar in.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
if you wanted sweet and low or Splenda, you put that in. But you didn't get it out of the dispenser as sweet tea or unsweet tea.
In So do you remember ordering pizza in Virginia and being like, what? This isn't pizza.
Well, again, the types of cheeses used, the type of sauce that's used, the kind of
Right.
crust. New York crust is legendary.
Yeah, it is.
It's
Oh, it's so
all.
good.
It's just made differently in New York. And
Yeah,
even though guys move down south and they're from New York and they make pizza, it's still not the same.
I'm sure it's not. Yeah,
Kind of
and
like bagels. The water in the bagel makes the bagel. the whatever it is in the dough for the pizza makes the pizza too.
Yeah, do a series here called Eat Talk Right, where teenagers are taught, and kids as well are kind of taught through our friend Alex, sensory writing and being like a food critic. And food really, it just is such a gateway into different cultural experiences and also memories as well. Like food is such an important thing, and the
Absolutely.
ability to like talk about it in
Hmm.
like so many different cultures. Shout out to Ama. She is very gracious about sharing her culture of Ghana through her food.
Hmm.
It's I don't know if you've ever had food from Ghana. It's some of the best food you'll ever eat in your life. I
Hmm.
highly
Hmm.
recommend it. Their jollof rice is the best jollof rice in the world.
Hmm.
Um, and no, she doesn't pay me to say that. But it really just some of the best food you'll ever have in your life. But a way of saying, like in so many different cultures, a way of saying, "Come here, come work with, like come be a part of my family, come be a friend or whatever," is to share food, right? And come let me, see a little bit of who we are as a people. And I think in New York as well, I think that it's really important to note that that too, right? The food in New York, whether it's the city or Long Island, I think says so much about the history, the rich history there, and just the amount of pride that even just like talking to you now, you've been a Virginian for a long time and now a South Carolinian, but just the amount of pride you have in talking about that food says a lot about that culture.
Well, food is culture.
Yeah.
Food is a strong part of every culture, and people that have a strong background in their culture have a strong commitment to their food, their heritage, and
Hmm.
that comes through when they cook for you from their heritage.
And we talk and kind of that heritage talks about that pride, that New York pride that I think comes from having multiple cultures. We are about to come to a close. Let's go ahead and leave with the Woodstock story. So because I love this story. So for those of you that don't know, Woodstock was a musical festival, and they've done it several times, but it was in New York. The first one in 1969, probably the most famous music festival ever. Talk a little bit about your experience with Woodstock.
Well, in just a little background to that, my family won the lottery in 1967. Not like today's lotteries, I can tell you that. We were a family that won either 5,000 or 50,000, and it so happened out of the 50 people that won, we were a $5,000 family. But my father immediately decided to buy a 9-passenger station wagon and a pop-up camper. So the first trip that we took in 69 was to upstate New York, not realizing that we're passing right through Woodstock as it was letting out. And we saw all the mud covered, peace loving hippies that you ever want to see. People riding in Volkswagen buses on the top of the buses, hanging out the windows. It was something like you'd never see at any time anywhere else. Woodstock was a culture changer for music in the world. In the world, they had artists from Britain, from Ireland, from all over the USA. I'm not sure about anywhere else. I'm sure there were, but it
Yeah.
was unlike anything else. It was a real time. It really set the tone.
Did y'all get to go like see any of the performers, or did you hear any of the
No,
performances?
Chad. We just caught them as it was leaving.
Oh, that's right.
But it was really interesting to see. It took us probably 2 hours to get past that point, and just throngs and throngs of people leaving Woodstock. Asker's Farm was where it all took place, and
Right.
it was certainly a phenomenon.
No, I believe that for sure. Well, thank you so much, Bob, for your time today. Wow, we went long, and I'm okay with that. So thank you so much for your time today, Bob. We'll be back another time. We've got some great episodes coming up. We've got an episode on Minnesota coming up. I'm very excited about, and we've got our first of probably multiple Virginia episodes coming up.
Let me just
So
make one last comment, Chad, if you'll allow it. Long
absolutely.
Island, Long Island is a 110-mile long island, and it's beaches on both shores, north and south shore. It is 50 miles, 30 miles from Manhattan. But once you leave Manhattan and go west, you've got 4, 5, 600 miles of New York still, and it is a beautiful, beautiful place.
All right. Yep. So there's your sales pitch. Next time you go to New York, go to Long Island.
There you go.
All right, guys. Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay, Chad. Thank you.